Tawasol project in Egypt. Now we'll start with the background of the project, the context of the project, and why we thought of having this partnership with Carey Institute, and who was the main stakeholders, and where it was done, and when we started it. And then I leave the floor to my colleagues from Carey Institute in order to present the how process and how was the whole experience, because I think they will be able more to have this insights because they were into the project. Actually, I joined the project 2 months ago, so they will have all the insights of the implementation and all the steps of it. So now we'll start with the background. Unfortunately, the presentation is not shown in my Skype, so I'll go through it on my own, and I refer to the slides while talking. So now we'll start with the background.
I'm moving the slides as you talk, so I'll try to be coherent with your
thank
words.
you. Okay, first of all, this project, Tawasol project, started in June 2018, 1 year ago, and it came to respond to the education and child protection needs of the most vulnerable children among the Syrian refugees and Egyptian host communities in Greater Cairo, Alexandria, and Damietta. And it came to support a number of 14 Syrian-led learning centers, which were many of them operating with minimal resources with low qualified teachers. And when we talk about the main barriers of education or education in emergencies in Egypt, we can see that we can set them into 3 main barriers. The first one is the access to education, and we usually respond to it through providing the cash grants. And the second barrier is the quality of education, and we usually respond to it through 2 main interventions. The first one is the teachers training, and the second one is enhancing the infrastructure of the educational entities. When we move to the third barrier, it's about protection, and we usually respond to it through the soft component, the soft activities of related to the parents, to the children, teachers, school management, and the child protection and educational committees, community-based committees. The pilot today came under the barrier number 2, which is quality of education. One of the main trainings that were planned to be done through Tawasol project was the training for primary school teachers in crisis contexts. This training, the one developed by the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies, it was implemented as a face-to-face TOT training in year 1 of the project, and then it was the pilot project was based on it. The pilot project came mainly as it was developed mainly to facilitate flexible access to a digital community of practice. It was like an online platform in order to have a larger number of teachers having access to the training, the tech training online throughout the whole week, and having like a discussion at the end of every week. This is a simple description for it. As you see that the tech training is mainly, I'll have now talk about the tech training, and then we'll go deep into the pilot of the online platform. The tech training, as I think many of you know, that it has 2 main parts. It's the introductory training package and the 4 core modules. As shown in slide 3, the 4 core competencies of it, it's mainly about teachers. The first one is teachers' role and well-being. This is the learning resources in the community. So as you see that the pilot was based on this tech training. And it came mainly for the aim to extend learning and deepen conversations around well-being, inclusion, social emotional learning, lessons, planning and assessments. And it was in partnership with Carey Institute. They helped us in having like an online platform in order to have a learning professional development opportunities for these teachers. Now we'll go through the why process, what, who, and what, and then the facilitators from Carey Institute will have the time to talk about the how thing. When you have a look over slide 4, for why we gone through this project with Carey Institute, mainly Tawasol pilot set out focusing on the following objectives. The first one is to test a blended learning, as I mentioned, learning professional development, in order to refine the understanding of the local assets, needs, and capacities of the Syrian refugees and host communities, educators in Egypt, and to develop a community of practice between and within the learning centers to foster collaboration, because as you know, we are implementing this project in different governorates, and definitely they have different kind of nature and different kind of backgrounds. So we were enhancing to have like sharing the experience between them and having a platform to see how each community are implementing the same kind of interventions, educational interventions. And it was because in order to cultivate the teacher leadership and to build sustainable onboarding and professional learning models. When we see who was the main stakeholders, the partners were mainly Plan International, Ireland office, and Egypt country office. And it was in partnership with Carey Institute Center for Learning and Practice. And the main participants were Syrian refugee and host community educators in Egypt, the ones placed in the Syrian-led learning centers, started learning centers in the project. And the facilitators of this platform was mainly the instructional team and the Arab-speaking experts in Carey Institute. And the donor, it's one of ECHO funded projects. It's like the third year we are implementing this project here in Egypt. It's mainly funded by the European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations. And the resources used in this piloting was the tech introductory package, as I mentioned, and the sustainable learning framework of Carey Institute. Then we can move to what is mainly the project. It's about providing an easily accessible, relevant professional development opportunity through their online learning design services and platform, facilitated by volunteering Arab-speaking experts. And they were done through the online learning platform with weekly meetups, as I mentioned, over Zoom website, and it was engaging participants from different locations, from the 6 communities across 4 governorates: Damietta, Alexandria, Sharqiyya, and Giza. And if we go through the timeline, I believe that this project took like from 9 to 10 months. It started last August by the consultations of the educators, having the terms of reference done, having the onboarding facilitators, reaching the drafting the first draft of the material, and it ended with the finalizing, evaluation, and reporting upon it. So this is mainly the background and the briefing about the project. And now I leave the floor to the facilitators in order to take us through the how process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aya. This is Julie Casper from the Carey Institute for Global Good, Center for Learning and Practice, and I'm very honored to be with you all today. Thank you for making time to learn about this project And thank you to the Plan International Office in Ireland and the country office in Egypt for working with us on this. It was a great learning experience for all of us, and really offers some pathways forward for the work that we're all trying to do globally and within our regions to reach as many teachers as possible, and not just through one-off teacher trainings, but through sustained engagement. Teachers, I myself am a classroom teacher by training, and as educators, we need continued support. And so the idea, as Aya presented so clearly in talking about the background, is really to provide this ongoing support and a community of practice for educators in the field, in their schools. Aya, thank you for talking about the consultations that led to this, because they were a very important part of the design process. And as Aya mentioned, we were working with the TiCC training pack, the Teachers in Crisis Context training pack, as the starting point. And the teachers had all had face-to-face training. And then through those consultations, the question was asked, what would you like to spend more time discussing, learning about, sharing in terms of your practice? And that's where we ended up coming in as the Carey Institute, was to really focus on those areas that teachers wanted more sustained engagement and dialogue around. So this is the graphic you're seeing right now is a illustration of our sustainable learning framework. We really believe that the focus should be on practice mastery, and that deep learning happens through reflection. So I'm going to take you through a couple of slides that tell you a little more about the sustainable learning framework that we were working from, and then I'll actually show you some pages from the course and what that looked like and how we went about the implementation of these online components. If we could have the next slide. When we're looking at our sustainable learning framework, we look at these design elements that are central to that, which is that we focus on the participants. Who are they? What do they need? What do they want? What is their context? And how are we responding to that daily context? Not to some abstract idea, but to what they are experiencing day to day. And that the work we're doing is job embedded, that it is useful in the moment to what they are doing each day. Next slide. We are very keen to work in areas of digital discovery. Since this work was as an online community, we wanted to make sure that we had strong social structures, ways for participants to engage with each other and with the facilitators. We used digital dashboards so that participants could see how they were progressing through the course and the community, and we could also monitor that. And then we looked for value patterns. Where are people really engaging and finding value in this learning opportunity? Next slide. And finally, within our within our sustainable learning framework, we have these learning loops that are very central. I'll just highlight a couple of them. One is that we have to curate the content very carefully, and this was especially challenging in an Arabic language context, but we had a wonderful team supporting that. And that we want to use the data, both the quantitative and the qualitative data, the feedback we're getting from participants, to drive the practice community forward. Finally, we really want to recognize and validate what people are doing on a daily basis and build upon that through reflection and dialogue. So moving into what the course actually looked like and the space actually looked like, this is the English version of the course. It is still on our platform and is available and may be something of use to your community or some adaptation of it. It's very easy to clone these courses within our platform, which is Eurikos, and to make changes to those. So for this particular project, there was a desire to focus on well-being and learning, social-emotional learning, trauma-informed practice, and then to focus on pedagogy and curriculum, looking at lesson planning and assessment specifically. So you can see we designed this as a 6-week course with a getting started and a closing section, and then 2-week modules in between that were very much focused on the content of this community and on the practice within these areas for our participants. The next slide shows the Arabic version of the course, which is what we used in Egypt to implement. So the English version was built as our starting point, and then through a very complex process. And I want to thank Yusra, who's on the call, for her leadership and great effort in helping to translate this into Arabic. We converted all of the materials into Arabic so that they were easily accessible for our participants. And I should mention that this platform is accessible on mobile phones. It's mobile phone compatible, and that's how most of the participants accessed the content as well as the discussion threads to talk with each other in the course. Like I said, it's easy to clone this, so it can be changed into any language relevant to the context of the participants, keeping it relevant and accessible for them. Next slide. So we're going to move into looking at how it was organized, the actual course content and the lessons. And forgive us if these slides are a bit small on your screen, but you will get the PowerPoint so you can look at them more. And you can always email me if you'd like access to have a closer look at the course. Next slide shows what the first module looked like. And, you know, it's a typical sort of baseline or foundation for a community of practice. So talking about what our norms were, what our expectations were in this community. Then the participants shared their teaching philosophies and their professional learning goals. So everybody was starting with a grounding in why we're here, what we're doing here, what we expect from this community, and what we're bringing to this community as well. What are our assets and talents, and what are our goals and desired outcomes for participation. The next module focused on well-being and learning. And you'll recognize, if you're familiar with the TiCC pack, you'll recognize this little figure here. So we took materials directly from that TiCC training pack, and then we built upon those. And here we were focusing on how do we take care as educators, and how do we take care of our communities, our students and families. We looked at social emotional learning, how to ensure a safe, inclusive, and productive classroom environment. And then we had a little check-in and some feedback on this module, and as we were moving through the community, how the participants were feeling. This was critically important, and our facilitators will talk more about that later. In the next module, in the next slide, we see a sample lesson plan, and it's quite small and hard to see, but this is on a vertical screen moving down like a mobile phone or a computer. So this module started with a video that had Arabic captions, and then there was some information and graphics, some things to read and consider. There was a slideshow looking at some elements of inclusive practice. And then you'll see that in the far right, there's an embedded discussion. So people are talking about the materials and their own practice, and you'll see a better example of that later. The next module focused on pedagogy and curriculum and planning. Again, you'll probably recognize that graphic from the TiCC training pack. And here we were looking at lesson planning and assessment specifically, and doing some lesson study. And in the lesson study, this was actually the participants sharing lesson plans with each other and analyzing those lesson plans for elements that had been introduced in the TiCC training face-to-face, and again reviewed here in the online module, so that they could actually apply this to their day-to-day practice and give some feedback to each other. The next slide shows a bit of the lesson, one of the lessons from this module. And again, you'll see it started with some questions asking them to review 4 videos, short clips from classrooms. These were all in Arabic, and so they were looking at Arabic learning context, and they were asked to look for particular aspects of the lesson in these videos. And then they were asked to consider a lesson planning cycle. What does it look like to plan, to do, to check for understanding, and then to act on the data and the feedback that you're getting. Finally, in this lesson, they were asked to share lesson plans and reflect with each other on what's working, what could be improved. And the next slide shows the final module, which was just sort of wrapping things up, reflecting on the experience, and then talking about what this community wanted in the future, what next steps they envisioned for this project. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move into a little more of how people actually connected as a community here, and how they shared knowledge with each other and with their facilitators. On the next slide, you'll see that we had team discussions. These were on the platform, embedded into the course. They were in Arabic. The sample that you're seeing is from my screen which is in the English language mode, because that's my mode. For those who were working in the Arabic language mode, it had right to left alignments, so easy for people to access and communicate with each other here. And you can see this is like a common discussion thread. People post something, people respond to that. They can share videos and lesson plans and resources in these spaces. Our facilitators were very active in these spaces with them, dialoguing with them about their work. Another tool that we used that was very important and very effective was Zoom conferencing. So on the next slide, you get a sense of this, which you're all familiar with, which is just bringing people together online with video or without, but certainly with audio, accessible by phone or tablet or computer. And we had weekly meetings. The facilitators will tell you more about these, where participants could gather in real time with each other and with the facilitators and talk about what was happening that day or that week in their classrooms and seek resources and support from each other. And I think this was one of the most dynamic and impactful parts of this process and this project. The next screen shows some of the ways in which people shared resources with each other. So in this example, one of the participants actually uploaded a photograph of their lesson plan that they shared with their colleagues and received feedback from colleagues and facilitators on that lesson plan. So that in a nutshell gives you an overview of sort of how the course worked. Moving into the next slide, all the time that the students, the participants were active in the course, we were gathering analytics, we were evaluating and really looking at the feedback from our participants so that we could be making changes as needed in real time for the participants. The next slide shows our data dashboard, what it looked like on our platform. As instructors and facilitators, we could monitor how people were moving through the space. And you'll see it's quite interesting. We had inserted many videos into the course, thinking those would be a very quick and accessible way for people to access content. However, very few people watched the videos, and we learned that this was because of Wi-Fi connectivity issues. However, if you look at pages viewed, the majority of participants moved through all of the pages, and many of the tests or quizzes that were embedded, there was actually only one in this course, but they moved through that at a regular pace in consultation with their facilitators. So, this is in real time, so we can always be monitoring how people are engaged and who's engaged, and then reach out to those who are struggling perhaps with the technology or with time and other commitments in their schedules. On the next screen, you'll see another of our feedback loops was a survey. We had surveys at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the course. So this is an example of the mid-course survey, which we delivered through Google Forms and in bilingual format. And participants were able to give us feedback on how things were going and what more they needed or wanted. And this was very useful to our facilitation team so that they could adapt and respond to what the participants' needs were. Finally, on the last slide for my section here, there were focus groups. So Mohamed Morsi, who is not on the call with us, but is part of the Plan Egypt team, was very important as one of our facilitators. We had a team of 4 facilitators, and he was the only one in Egypt at the moment and working with the various learning centers. And so he saw teachers in person and was able to talk with them directly about their experience, how it was going. And at the end, he led a focus group to get more feedback in dialogue with the participants on how things were going. So we really appreciated that. I'm going to turn the presentation over to our facilitators now to talk about the experiences in the field. And I just want to note that our facilitation team was outstanding. These are experts in the field with various backgrounds. And outside of Mohamed Morsi, who is on the Plan Egypt team, the additional 3 facilitators all were volunteering their time, which we were very fortunate to have their enthusiasm about the project and their willingness to give of that time, and we're so grateful. Mona Yunus is an expert in ICT and education in emergencies, and so she brought that lens and that experience to the project, as well as experience in evaluation, monitoring and evaluation of projects. Yumna Reda is an expert in Montessori education and is a principal of a Montessori school, but she is also expert in peace building and conflict resolution. And she brought that experience to the team and to the course. And then our third facilitator, Eileen Winokur, is an expert in curriculum and planning with a focus on English language instruction. And so she brought that expertise and focus to the team. And as a team, it was very, I think, really powerful to have this diverse team of experts working with the participants, with the teachers there in Egypt, because each of them had a different lens and a different focus they could bring to the discussions with the participants. And they'll talk more about that. So I'm going to stop there with gratitude to the Plan Egypt team and to our wonderful facilitators. And I'm going to turn it over now to Mona and Yomna to walk you through the implementation, what it actually looked like, and perspectives from the field.
Yes, hello everyone. Can you all hear me? I hope.
Yes, loud and clear.
Good.
Thanks, Mona.
Yeah, good. This is Mona Yunus. I'm stationed in California. And what Julia did not mention is that the facilitation team is actually scattered in different countries. I'm in California, Yomna is in Canada, and Eileen is in Kuwait, and then we had Muhammad in Egypt. And it was fantastic and very fruitful and constructive experience. On the next slide, I will tell you a little bit about the facilitation and the learning experiences. It was really very enjoyable for us as facilitators. We had a very good understanding between us, and we do think, although we did it voluntarily, that it was worthwhile for all of us. It was for the participants, actually it was a new experience for many of them, I would say for all of them. Engaging in a blended learning community of practice or professional development opportunity was completely new to them. To engage in something that is practice oriented and that is, as Aya said at the very start, work embedded, was completely new to them. Our role as facilitators was actually to hand over the responsibility of their learning and to support them throughout that process. What we did was we told them, okay, here you have resources, here you have videos, here you have modules. Please go through them and tell us. You tell us how does it. What do you think about those resources? Try to embed them in your work and tell us what have been your challenges. And then they would come back and tell us about the challenges they had implementing those new strategies or teaching techniques. It was very fruitful and very constructive because the discussions themselves were ongoing, and they added always a new perspective when they discussed techniques or strategies. The facilitators, I would say we really had a very good understanding between us, and this was and is very crucial. Thank you. Next slide. The teachers were highly motivated, and this engaged us more and more, and we were very enjoying the facilitation process because the teachers actually were really motivated and wanted to learn, very eager to learn, and very appreciative of the provided opportunity. They engaged actively in reflective assignments. They discussed very actively. And what we had as material online was only a trigger for deeper and deeper reflections and discussions. What started as difficult and not so smooth soon turned into the fuel of the course, and that is the discussion of in-class strategies and techniques. At first, they were a little bit maybe shy, not competent using the technology, and they just read what's there. And then when we encouraged them more and more, please discuss, tell us, what have you been doing today in class? What strategy did you use? How was it? What challenge did you face? When they started discussing that among each other, and we as facilitators tried to give them constructive feedback on that, here was the fuel of the whole course. The activity and the discussions, and sometimes it was actually they were discussing very quickly and responding to each other very quickly, and we as facilitators had an issue to follow up because it was so energetic and so active. Thank you. Next slide. Here we are going to tell you what worked and what needs to be improved. And now, after looking back and reflecting into the course, we can say that creating opportunities for teachers to express themselves, to have a voice, and to talk about their teacher philosophies and their teaching goals has been very effective. Organizing weekly meetups was very, very important. Those teachers need the human interaction, and because we are so remotely distant from them and we cannot meet them in person, we came up with the idea of having these Zoom meetups on a weekly basis, and they were always engaged, they were always there, although sometimes these meetups were immediately after they returned home. And they were very tired, and we appreciated that they were there, and they discussed, and we started always tell us what has been the main challenge this week. They would tell us the challenges, they would tell us what did they do, what strategies did they do, and they would then start to discuss among each other how to improve their teaching. At one point, they asked us to dig deeper into the issue of child protection and child well-being, and we gave them the answers we could give them, but they needed more. So at that point, we told them, okay, it seems that you need a real expert in the field. We invited a guest. She is a lady in London, and she is an expert psychologist who has been dealing with children in conflict and crisis contexts, and she started to discuss with them the challenges they have within the classrooms around bullying, around children with trauma, and so on. That was very, very positively received. Then the next was sharing practical strategies for the classroom. They did that very actively, and we think this was one of the best parts of the course. What could be improved actually is by starting a face-to-face meeting, which would have helped in building a community, trust, rapport much more quicker, because we needed the first week, 2 weeks, in order to build that rapport and that community and trust. Introducing and practicing with technology before joining the online community would have also saved us a lot of time. Continuously checking on participants' learning goals as those goals shift over the course, and perhaps a longer program would have been very beneficial, because they needed the trust, building the confidence within the community takes time, so maybe a longer course would have been better. Thank you. Next. Now I'm handing over to Yomna, and Yomna is going to talk about the impact on professional growth and outcomes. Thank you, everyone. I'm coming back after a couple of slides. Yes, Yomna?
Yes, thank you, Mona. Hello, everyone. My name is Yomna, enough introductions, but I just, I want to speak to you about how, when we were facilitating the course, we had some intended outcomes for teachers. So one important thing was to foster the community of practice within the learning centers, because we wanted them to have collaboration and feel how important is it for teachers to share their experiences and pedagogical tools together. So this was one of the main intended outcome, and it's all supported by research in curriculum and pedagogy and teacher professional learning. The other outcome that we were after was to enhance the educators' knowledge and to develop this positive classroom culture in which teachers can feel that this is a safe space where they can share their struggles in the classroom, what they need to learn, how they can, and then they talk among each other about how they foster the well-being of their students as well. So next slide, please. So as Julie mentioned, throughout the course, there were surveys pre and then within the course and then post participation. So from what you can see in this slide, from what we were intending, like for instance, to create the supportive and inclusive community of practice, first of all, we didn't have any novice teachers. So none of the teachers had really knowledge about any of what we were trying to, or our intended goals. They were actually either, we're not going to say novices, so they all had at least 5 years of experience teaching. And if you, so this diagram you have, okay, so level, the gray and the orange, this is that perhaps so the knowledge they're still developing, and then as they move on, they change into the two other colors, which is the yellow and the blue, until they have expertise, like, or they can feel they can be experts. So we have, for instance, one of the most areas where they develop, we're creating the responsive, so the first one, and positive learning community. The other one was the problem solving with colleagues. This also had an impact, and also the teaching strategies, when they shared their lesson plans together and the ideas about what they do to foster socio-emotional learning, for instance, and because most of the children that they had were really traumatic, like they had experienced trauma in their lives. Next slide, please. So this slide, we just quoted some of the participants' reflections. So one of them said, I learned communication, active listening, and how to develop these skills to improve interaction and minimize chances of misunderstanding. The training was also a wonderful opportunity for us to get to know each other and share experiences, ideas, educational resources, and mutual support. So it all goes back to all the theories in teacher professional learning about building community of practice that goes outside of the classroom and the regular professional development that's required by the school. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm not sure if people can see it. I can't. It's about the facilitator's reflection. Okay, I'm just gonna go on. So for the facilitator's reflection,
Sorry, Yamna, I'm showing the screen. I suppose everyone can see it.
So they can see it. Maybe it's only mine. So I mean, from the facilitators, from our perspective, we felt that teachers learned how to connect with each other and share their expertise. And honestly, at the beginning, like the first 2 weeks, there was kind of a disconnect between teachers. And this is also like shown by research on online learning and how people interact together. At the beginning, they don't want to share too much. They don't feel comfortable. So having a synchronous weekly forum where they met each other, they saw the face-to-face kind of thing, virtually though, but they made this human connection. They were able to share more and more, perhaps from week 3 onwards. And then we saw that the development of specific skills really took place, because they were asking about how can I implement this technique, how do I make sure that the kids in the classroom, despite of their different lived experiences, they can still learn the content that they were providing. However, we saw that the teachers, they expressed their concern about the well-being of the children that they worked with, and they wanted to learn more about how to help their children, their students. Another facilitator's reflection that we made after the end of the course, was we wanted actually the teachers to be future facilitators within their own community, or probably, or maybe trainers as well to other teachers. So we felt that their confidence increased and their leadership capacity was developed within week 3 and 4 of the webinars that we were recording. They had no problem sharing their experiences. We also encouraged them to share because some of them didn't have access to technology as well. It was easier for them to use their phones and choose and log in through their phones than using a computer or a laptop. And also there was the development of skills to learn in a blended online format. So we saw that they were struggling a bit about how to use learning and communication technologies, and we felt that these were, Mona will discuss this in the lessons learned. The next slide. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Yumna. I'm going to go through a couple of lessons learned that are actually very important if this course is going to be reused or implemented in another format. Thank you. Next slide. I'm going first to talk about some lessons learned that are related to pedagogy and the design of curriculum and materials. It is very, very important. I cannot express more how important it is to invite the teachers to express their learning needs and goals, and actually to design the whole course upon those needs and goals. This could be done through the pre-course survey. In that case, we have done that. And during the course and during the dialogue, we always ask them about their needs and about their goals. And we tried to curate and to change and to adapt the material accordingly. Sometimes we would change the discussion question. Sometimes we would bring a guest in our Zoom meeting. Sometimes we would change the focus of the Zoom meeting itself in order to always to reply back to their needs and to their goals, because we wanted an experience that is really work embedded, that they can make use of immediately in the classroom. Finding online material in the respective language, and we are talking here about Egypt, was Arabic, was really very challenging, because there are very little constructive and good and quality resources in the Arabic language. However, we had a very good team that helped in translating some of the English material, and we invested in the adequate resources for identification of linguistically appropriate materials and for translation, and that was very critical during the design phase. Next, please. And then what we did was also we engaged yes, it was very important actually when we reflect back to that course that we were more than just one or two facilitators because of different reasons. We are scattered across the globe. We had different time zones. For sometimes it would be very difficult for a facilitator to jump into the Zoom meeting. And if we have two other facilitators, that would be actually more convenient. Especially if those facilitators are volunteers. Therefore, it is very important to have more than one or two facilitators. Very important to have experts in social emotional learning and in EdTech, and that should be included on the facilitation team, and the guest speaker also, and in the course guest speaker. Designing reflective assignments and engaging in reflective discussions is highly, highly, highly important. This is actually where the learning was taking place. This is where the sustainable knowledge construction is taking place. When they talk, when they discuss and reflect on their own practices, and then, oh, this was not good enough, I should improve it in this and that way, What about trying this or that strategy out? This has been very important during our course experience. The online material, as said before, was just a trigger for deeper and deeper thinking, deeper and deeper discussion about how they are teaching, how learning is taking place within the classroom. Providing support and follow-up to sustain knowledge building and professional relationship building during and after the course is very important. They, during our very last Zoom meeting, they asked for a WhatsApp group. We created a WhatsApp group for them, and we would really hope that the professional development relationship with that group will continue on the group. Yes, thank you. Next. We should never ever underestimate the need for and the power for synchronous and face-to-face gathering or meetups. Those teachers, they need that kind of human interaction. This is what we learned. We learned that the synchronous meetups were highly important to them. They motivated them to continue. They gave them a boost to implement what we are discussing. Those meetups were actually, let's say, the fuel of the course, because it charged them with new energy to go on and to continue the course. An in-country kickoff event with all participants and facilitators would be ideal, but in our case was very, very, very difficult. We are, as facilitators, living in different parts of the world and not in Egypt. Considering the differing work schedules and time zones is very important. We had learning centers that would have their day off on Saturdays and others that had their day off on Thursdays. And we had always to accommodate in order to include everyone and to find timing that is convenient for the teachers. That meant usually that the meetups were at 2:00 a.m. at my time zone. But for me, and I do think also for Yomna, we didn't mind because we enjoyed the whole experience very much. We need to keep in mind the different communication styles and the participants' needs. And we need to keep in mind that it's very important to invite participants to discuss their questions and give teachers a much needed voice. The much needed voice is highly important. They need to talk. They need to tell someone what are their challenges, what are their problems within the classroom. They need to discuss that, and in their context, they don't have that kind of opportunity, and the course gave them that opportunity. It's very important to maintain digital spaces for community to gather after the course or the official activity ends. And as said, we formed a WhatsApp group in order to continue the communication with the teachers and in order to provide them with ongoing support and with ongoing dialogue. Yes, and the next, please. Technology. We need to ensure that teachers understand and feel comfortable with the technology that will be used, including registering, posting messages, communicating with each other and with the facilitators. This was one of the challenges because we hope to have a much bigger cohort of participants, but the rest of those who could not participate, it was due to their incompetency to use the technology. What could be done? Recording, step-by-step demonstration of the registration process, which could be shared through other channels such as WhatsApp. That could be done and would have also helped very much in boosting the competence of the other participants. Structuring a face-to-face kickoff meeting and to familiarize the participant with the platform, with the technology, how to use it on the mobile, how to use it on the laptop, how to register. That would have been ideal if we could have done that. and to ensure they can maximize the use of the different platforms. And we could see that mobile usage was very high. Consider a standalone course, or consider adding several modules to a course to help participants engage with the simple apps and online tech resources is also something that we learned throughout that course. Next slide, please. Certification and validation, highly important. We need to consider when a course is being designed, mobile approaches to recognize participation and to recognize or to provide some kind of credential, certification, validation of their PD, and to credentialize what they have been doing. We could offer micro-credentialing and digital badging of opportunities. If possible, that would be great, in addition to participation certificates. In that course, when they finished, they got participation certificates, and but what could be added is some kind of mobile micro-credentials that they could use in different contexts. If they move out of Egypt and go back maybe to Syria, they could be using those in that new context. Developing e-portfolios with the participants as they move through the course so that they walk away with a record of their learning and their professional growth. This is also something that we could consider or think of, because e-portfolios help the teachers actually to monitor, to see, and to visualize their own progress. Offer next steps and leadership opportunities, and keep the development of youth, and that could be done by keeping the development of future facilitators or teacher leadership opportunities front and a center in the community of practice. It's very important to think about the next steps. And our idea was that this course should be an opportunity to build leadership, to hand over the responsibility of learning and professional development to the teachers themselves. And we could actually, throughout the course, see that there have been a couple of participants that have leadership skills and that are now ready to take over and to train the other teachers, maybe the other teachers in the other centers, or train them through blended learning facilities. And I think that's very important also to think of from the very start during the design phase. And I think I finished. Thank you very much, and thank you for having the opportunity to be on that call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mona and Yomna. You two are amazing, and I just want to thank the whole team, including Eileen and Morsi Mohammed as well. An incredible, powerful team of facilitators. And for those of you listening from other regions, really thinking about who your facilitators are and how they're working together and with your community, you can see is critically important, and you can hear that from our presentation. There's one more slide here that I want to share, and then I'm going to hand it back to Aya to wrap things up. And that's to think about what is the application of this Tawasol project to your learning context, those of you who are in other regions and other spaces around the world. We really feel that this has the potential to be, this design, this approach has the potential to be used in many different settings. We see that ongoing training and support is essential for educators in every teaching and learning context. Every teacher is in a process of continual growth, and it's really important that they have access to a community that is supporting them as they are teaching, so they can continue to explore and grow, as we were doing with Tawasol. It's also critically important to identify the interests and talents of the participators that you're working with, and wherever you are around the world, identifying what those interests and talents are, what the needs are as well, and then designing a response to those particular and unique needs and interests and talents of the teachers you're working with. So we see our responsive and sustainable approach within Tawasol as being applicable to other contexts. And finally, this use of a digital platform, so this sort of blended approach of starting with a face-to-face training And then following that up with an online community of practice, we see this as being very applicable across the board. And it has a few functions. One is that it does sustain the engagement and the learning for the teachers, but it also connects people across learning centers, school sites, regional and national boundaries, which is really important as many of our educators are on the move and in these sort of disparate, separate spaces and really need to be able to communicate and talk with each other. So you may be seeing some of these needs in your space, and we would propose that this approach is one way to bring people together and to really continue the learning and the dialogue that's so central to education. So with that, I turn it back to Aya to wrap things up, and then I think we'll do a little question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, so much. Thank you, Yumna and Muna, for that presentation and for that reflections from the course itself. It was really useful, and it was really reflecting what we have been through for like 1 year from now. Actually, as Julie said, that the online platform is an easier, or it's an accessible method to be done through the trainings and through the workshops, and specifically in Tawasol, it was so useful because, as I've mentioned, that it was being implemented in different locations, so it was an easier way for people to connect and a faster way for connection. Maybe some of the drawbacks that been mentioned by Muna and Yumna, it was about the orientation and the face-to-face meetings at the beginning of the project. But this could be taken care of in the next projects or in different contexts. But specifically to Tawasol and for its next steps, we can say that tech is available now. The digital tech is available now in both English and Arabic, and can be rolled out with a new cohorts and or to other connecting learners and facilitators all over the world. And also we can rely on the human assets, the teachers that have been trained and connected already to each other. We can let them play a vital role in cascading the knowledge and skills they got from this piloting project. In the next projects, I think that orientations are really important, and we can have like live trainings and face-to-face trainings through phase 2 of the project, or the 4th year of implementing ECHO project. And as Julie said, that this online platforming could be applied in any of the projects facing the challenge of the remote distance of being of the implementation. So I totally agree that this kind of online method is really helpful. And I'd like to thank you, Carey Institute, so much for giving that opportunity, because it's totally new to the programming methods in Egypt. And it was, I think, the first time to have like an online trainings on or online platform to share the experiences through. Yani we usually do it through face-to-face workshops and trainings. So having the feedback from the teachers then included in this online digital tech pilot project was really good, and was really pushing us to have like a more kind of these trainings. And also I'd like to thank Yusra very much. She is with us now. She was the former project manager, and she has been working on this project from the very first moment, the piloting and the project itself. And there's a lot of effort being done in this project as a whole, in the on-ground implementation or having this pilot on her arms. So thank you so much for this, and I think now we can have a floor for questions or for inquiries to Carey Institute if you want to ask anything about the methodology or the online thing.
There's a question in the chat box from Helen, and she's asking if we could say something about the gender and ages of the participants, and the first year extension is with the same participants or a new group. So anybody who might want to speak to the gender and ages of the participants, and then who will be in the next phase of the project, the same participants or a new group?
Content or the training.
Aya, can you say that again? Your mic is breaking up. Aya, we can't hear you. Do you want to type into the chat box and I can read out your response? In terms of the gender and ages of participants in this phase of Tawasol, I believe that all the participants were female, and I don't really know the age range. Mona or Yomna might be able to speak. I want to say sort of middle-aged, 30s and 40s, but Mona and Yomna, can you confirm the age range?
Yes, most of them were 30s, and most of them had at least 5 years of teaching experience. The teaching experience was either in Syria itself or in Egypt.
Thank you, Mona. And in terms of the students, the teachers we're working with, the students were in the lower elementary age range from about 4 to 15, 6 to 13. And as Mona said, the majority of the teachers had experience. Yeah. And then in terms of phase 2, Aya, the question remains, will there be the same participants in the next phase of the project or a new group?
Project we're working on the
I think it's very difficult to understand Aya, if not impossible. So maybe, I don't know if...
Yeah, this is Emilia. I can give you some information.
Yeah, thank you, Emilia. Emilia, and maybe Julie can also answer some of the questions.
Yeah, so for the next phase, Aya, can you speak?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Okay, so then you can just explain the next phase. Thank you.
Regarding phase 2 of the project, the 4th year, this is the time that we are going to have like a pathway to the public education here in Egypt. We'll be including the public schools and the Ministry of Education in our target. We'll be working with the public teachers inside the public schools as well. Beside the Syrian teachers inside the Syrian-led learning centers. We are going to work with the same target group, but inside we'll focus more on in the public schools. Regarding all the components, regarding the teachers, it will include the social workers, the teachers inside schools, the parents, and the children inside schools. So it's a bit different from the last phase. because of this pathway thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is Emilia. Can I just add a few information? Basically, this next phase has a stronger focus on public governmental school because ultimately the objective is that children who are now enrolling in learning centers will be basically reintegrated into public governmental school. That's because learning centers, Syrian learning centers, are not recognized by the Ministry of Education. So it's completely a parallel system. And we are trying to really support this pathway and to coordinate with the ministry in order for these children to be reintegrated into public governmental school. Now, when it comes to teachers, of course, we see an opportunity also for public governmental school teachers to benefit from this kind of training because they do work with refugees, but they do not have like a specific support in terms of trainings. So we envisage to start a conversation with the Ministry of Education, being aware that there will be some challenges there, but we want to start this conversation, and hopefully during my next trip in Egypt, when I and myself and some senior management team from Plan Egypt will be able to meet with the Ministry of Education. On the other side, we will still have a focus on learning centers, so we will continue supporting teachers in the learning centers. So they will still be targeted by our next phase of the project. I will conclude, and I want to take the opportunity also to thank Plan Jordan, because Plan Jordan released one staff with Sahar Materne. She traveled actually to Egypt during the preparation phase, and she delivered the TiCC face-to-face training. Okay, over to you.
Thank you, Aya Amelia. This is Julie again, and I'm looking at the chat box. Helen O'Reilly posted another question. She's asking, are you thinking of replicating some elements of this great project in any other countries? And I'll just say from the Carey Institute side, we're very keen to do that with any partner regional offices that might be interested in testing this, piloting this in their region to see how it works and making adaptations for their context. Emilia, I don't know if you want to speak to that from your side, or anyone else or anyone else on the call, frankly, in terms of how this might look in your country. Is it something you might want to replicate or try?
Well, this is Emilia. I definitely will look into this. It very much depends on funding. As you may all know, like I work for a Plan National office, and we have one donor who is like our big donor, and but now beyond that, we don't have access to other funding opportunities, but I'm happy also to support other national offices or country offices who will be interested in starting this type of project, and to facilitate of course the startup. I will be very happy to do this across the organization. Are there any other questions?
Yes, this is Veronica. I have a general question about the gender aspects of the experience. I see all the people involved in setting the pilot are women, which I'm absolutely delighted. But what are your analyses about how this pilot can have a gender transformative component in terms of how it changes the relationship between male and female teachers, or how they understand the different needs of the children, depending if they are girls, boys, or whatever. So, if you have any kind of analysis or reflection about the gender impact of the pilot? Thank you.
Veronica, thank you for that question. It's a really important question. I think I wish that Mohammed Morsi were on the call with us to talk about his experience as the only male involved in the Tawasol project. And he was a great member of the team and a great participant. And I'll let Mona and Yumna talk to any of the gendered aspects they experienced in the facilitation. But from my side, I think it was very empowering for the participants themselves to start to see themselves as teacher leaders, and for women to see themselves as leaders within educational systems and educational structures is very, very important. I think that's a transformative aspect in terms of the work that we might be doing in various education spaces. If we see more women leading both professional learning and school systems, that could make a huge difference. Of course, in terms of some of the structures and outcomes that we see in those spaces. And I'll turn it over to Mona or Yumna to talk about what they might have experienced directly in terms of gender transformation or gender aspects of the project.
Yes, having been myself as working as a teacher for over 13 years, I know as a fact that the majority of teaching force in Egypt is female. And it was not astonishingly to see that 100% of the teaching force that participated in the course have been females. We were actually expecting that to happen. And it was transformative in the sense that actually we empowered them with new skills, leadership skills, training skills, and with new confidence level. Because what we could see is that they enhanced their confidence in teaching and also in mentoring and in guiding their fellow teachers. Maybe Yumna has something to say? Yes.
No, I mean, it's like we know that mostly teachers work in Egypt within, especially this age group would be female teachers. So as we said, it was not surprising. However, if you remember, Mona, we had one male participant who wanted to participate from Libya. Remember?
Yes, yes,
but
yes.
I don't know what happened after that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yusra, thank you. Yusra commented in the chat box that she found it interesting to see the female teachers using this technology. A few male participants showed more skill at the beginning on the platform, including the participant from Libya who found his way online into our space, but was a great participant. But Yusra said that the females exploring this technology was very transformative too, for them to be gaining competency and comfort in digital technologies was a really important and transformative piece of the project. Thank you, Yusra, for that comment. Any more questions before we wrap up? Some people are jumping off to next meetings.
May I just add something? Because my PhD has to do with the use of ICT-based learning for refugees and to empower refugees. One of the findings that I have is that new technologies such as blended learning, knowing the skill, how to use that kind of technology was perceived very much empowering by refugees. And my PhD had had to do with Syrian refugees. The Syrian refugees has said in the research that learning that kind of skill, learning new learning modes that would help them in the future is something they would see as empowering.
Thank you.
I could be asking during all the afternoon because I'm passionate about this project, but same as with the gender aspect, on the digital aspect that I see you're emphasizing now, how transformative it has been. Do you think that this experience has also in some way promote in the teachers the aspiration of the idea to use more digital or blended technologies in their classes, or to foster this interest on the students, etc.?
What we could see is that it encouraged them to think about more professional development opportunities that are ICT based. But they did not speak too much about using technology within the classroom. And I personally anticipate the reason for that has to do with available resources and has not to do with the confidence level.
If I can add just one point, that they also expressed that how easy it was to use their phones. So maybe if the platform would be in a form of an app, this would help them actually have more access to these learning opportunities as teachers, and then perhaps transform this in their classrooms later on. Thank you.
Thanks for adding that. And just to build on that, we would love to develop an app off of our platform or to work with partners. And we've just started conversations with other ICT partners out in the field in education and emergencies to see if we can bring some of these teacher trainings into an app space that exists already to make it more accessible. I think that's a very key point.
Yeah, I think maybe it's time to wrap up now, and I'm sure that Emilia, Julie, the people involved, I'm sure if anybody has any specific questions they would like to follow up on, that they will reply to emails. On behalf of the IQE network, I would just like to give my thanks to everybody involved in this for sharing such a great and innovative project, which has obviously been really successful in this context, and which I think all of us on the call can imagine being replicated in different ways and being further developed in other contexts. So many thanks to you all. I've really enjoyed it and learnt a lot from it, and it's great that we're able to share all this information with the wider network. Many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, also I'd like to thank everyone here for participating today, and I'd like to thank Carey Institute for this kind of a new training for us. And I agree with all people who said that this kind of piloting should be repeated in different contexts and in different countries, and I think we can use it in many different ways. So thank you everyone for today.
Yeah, thank you all a lot, especially our facilitators who are transmitting such an energy, and also to the Carey Institute and all the people implicated in the pilot. And I think we have done 90 minutes, so we need to say goodbye, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Veronica, for supporting this. Thank you very much, and thank you all, and to the next, and